Have you ever wondered if a serial killer could be living right next door? He might be the perfect husband, the friendly neighbor, the former Navy serviceman. But on cold winter nights, he would drive to the red light district, lure in women forgotten by society, and kill them methodically, coldly, like a machine. That man was John Eric Armstrong, the one whose true nature, once revealed, left the entire city of Detroit in stunned silence. Death on the frozen river. On January 2nd, 2000, in the frigid city of Detroit, a driver suddenly felt nauseous while crossing a bridge over the Rouge River. He pulled over to catch his breath, and as he leaned over the railing, he was shocked to see the lifeless body of a woman floating in the icy water below. Police quickly arrived at the scene. The victim was completely naked, with both hands tightly wrapped in nylon, an odd detail, as if someone had tried to preserve DNA evidence on her hands. There were no signs this was a suicide. The autopsy revealed she had been strangled and showed signs of sexual assault. Using fingerprint identification, police confirmed her identity as 39-year-old Wendy Jordan, a woman with a history of sex work and drug use, a death buried under ice and snow. But this was only the beginning of a brutal killing spree that would haunt Detroit for the next 6 months. The bodies that refused to stay hidden. On April 10th, 2000, more than 3 months after Wendy Jordan's body was discovered in the Rouge River, Detroit was shaken once again. This time it wasn't just one body. 3 women were found near the railroad tracks in Dearborn Heights, a suburb of Detroit. One lay exposed in an open area, as if deliberately placed to be seen. The other 2 were discovered in a storm drain, badly decomposed, disfigured, and reeking of decay. What horrified investigators wasn't just the number of victims, it was the way they had been arranged. All 3 women had been strangled and posed in provocative, even sexualized positions. This was no ordinary killer. The perpetrator clearly wasn't trying to hide the crimes. It seemed as though he wanted the police and society to see them. Fingerprint identification revealed the victims' names: Robin Brown, just 20 years old, Rosemary Felt, 32, and Kelly Hood, 34. All had previous arrests for prostitution, just like Wendy Jordan, the first known victim. These were women society often scorns, ignores, or forgets when they vanish. For police, this presented a daunting challenge. Investigating crimes against sex workers is notoriously difficult. No family reports them missing. No one remembers the last time they were seen. There's often no surveillance footage, no friends, and most importantly, no one paid attention when they were alive, nor when they disappeared. But now, Detroit could no longer look away. A serial killer was silently operating, and he had just sent a blood-soaked message. The killer's profile: pleasure in death. In the wake of the grisly murders, Detroit police officially requested assistance from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, a specialized team trained to investigate serial killers by analyzing psychological patterns and behavioral clues. After examining the crime scenes, victim profiles, and methods of killing, the BAU quickly concluded that all the murders were committed by the same person. This was the work of a true serial killer, not someone killing impulsively or for material gain, but someone driven by a deeper, darker compulsion. The psychological profile painted a chilling picture. White male, likely between 25 and 30 years old, appears normal, socially adaptable, likely living or working within the local community. Suffers from severe sexual deviance, particularly deriving pleasure from strangulation, a type of fetish rooted in deep psychological trauma, often stemming from childhood abuse. doesn't kill out of anger or greed. He kills to feel power, complete and total control over his victim. Most disturbingly, the killer doesn't want to hide his crimes. Leaving the bodies in visible locations posed in sexually suggestive ways is a deliberate message. He wants to be seen, he wants to be known, and perhaps he wants to be caught. Tracy Benjamin, a veteran behavioral analyst from the Los Angeles Police Department, explained, in cases like this, strangulation isn't just a method of murder. It's the source of the killer's gratification. He doesn't kill quickly. He savors every moment his victim struggles between life and death. That's when he feels powerful, in control. And sometimes that's the only kind of intimacy he's capable of feeling. This type of disorder is often found in individuals who suffered childhood trauma, sexual abuse, neglect, or domestic violence. When left unhealed, such trauma can manifest as hatred, sexual deviance, and eventually cyclical violence. The Detroit murders revealed a clear victim pattern: sex workers living on the margins of society, largely unnoticed. They're easy to approach, rarely searched for when missing, and most critically, easy to manipulate. He didn't choose victims at random, he hunted them. Given all these signs, the FBI confirmed Detroit was facing a dangerous, intelligent, and calculating serial killer. If his identity wasn't uncovered soon, the body count would continue to rise. Meanwhile, local police launched a quiet campaign, reaching out to surviving sex workers, hoping to find clues from those who had survived an encounter, the missed victims the killer had failed to claim, the near-dead victims, life-saving testimonies. Just when the police and FBI were hitting a dead end, an unexpected breakthrough came from those who were nearly victims but miraculously survived. They were the forgotten, the marginalized, living on the fringes of the city with no names, no protection, yet they turned out to be the most crucial pieces in exposing the face of a serial killer. The first was Devin Marcus, a 22-year-old transgender sex worker operating in downtown Detroit. During an extended round of questioning conducted by the task force, Devin recounted a horrifying experience from April 7th, just days before the bodies were found. Devin said he was approached by a white man with red hair, well dressed, driving a Jeep, and notably wearing a name tag that read Eric, suggesting he had a regular job, possibly even military or government employment. The man offered $40 for sex, a typical rate in the local street scene. After agreeing, the man drove Devin to a remote area near the train tracks, far from lights, people, or help. But when they arrived, there was no intimacy. Instead, the man suddenly attacked from behind, locking Devin in a chokehold. His eyes were filled with tension, pleasure, and something darker, like hatred. Devin fought desperately, feeling death draw near, but by sheer survival instinct managed to scratch, kick, and escape, running for life into the darkness. Devin's story caught the attention of investigators, and just days later, another survivor came forward, Wilhelmina Drain, also a sex worker who had been attacked on April 2nd, just a week before the discovery of the bodies. Wilhelmina recalled being taken near the railroad tracks by a man who seemed polite at first, only to turn violent and strangle her barehanded. In the chaos, she caught a glimpse of a tiger tattoo on his right arm, a detail Devin hadn't mentioned, but one that eerily matched older police data and emerging suspect descriptions. Both accounts described the same type of vehicle, same approach, same location, and most importantly, the same chilling brutality from one man. Police no longer had doubts. This was a single attacker, and he was hunting in a deliberate, organized way. Based on witness descriptions, his appearance, tattoo, vehicle, and especially the name tag reading Eric, investigators began combing through discharged military records and local residents. And one name stood out from the list: John Eric Armstrong, a former U.S. Navy sailor who had recently settled in Dearborn Heights with his wife and children after leaving the service in 1999. Not only did the name Eric match, but Armstrong also owned a Jeep identical to the witness's description, bore a tiger tattoo, and had served in the military, where name tags were standard issue. John Eric Armstrong had no prior criminal record, but all signs now pointed to him. And from that moment, the curtain began to lift, revealing a man who seemed kind and gentle, yet harbored a silent storm of death waiting to explode. How he killed. On April 12, 2000, police knocked on the door of John Eric Armstrong's home. His Jeep sat in the driveway. Hanging from the rearview mirror was the name tag, Eric, and on his right arm, the defining clue, a prominent tiger tattoo. Confronted with this evidence and the testimonies of surviving victims, John had no way to deny it. He was arrested that very night. At first, John remained silent, but when police presented DNA results that matched samples taken from Wendy Jordan's body, he lowered his head and confessed, coldly, calmly, as if he were relieved to finally let go. He admitted that Wendy Jordan was his first victim in Detroit. At the time, John had just moved to the city with his wife and children after leaving the Navy. Still unfamiliar with the area and fearful of being caught, he strangled Wendy and threw her body from the bridge, trying to stage the scene to look like a suicide. But from the second murder onward, John no longer cared about hiding. He began leaving the bodies at the crime scenes or arranging them in grotesque, suggestive poses. Not out of carelessness, but deliberately to be noticed. To John, the police discovering the bodies was part of the game. It gave him a twisted satisfaction, holding the power of life and death, terrorizing an entire city, yet remaining invisible. Under deeper interrogation, John began to reveal more murders, ones he had committed during his time in the Navy. While stationed overseas, he had been to places like Singapore, Thailand, and Hong Kong. And in each location, he followed the same ritual: find a sex worker, lure her away, and strangle her. The bodies were discarded in remote areas, near naval bases or quiet suburban roads. No weapons, no gunshots, just his hands, and a chilling, perverse sense of gratification. For John, murder wasn't just about ending a life. It was a ritual, a form of punishment he believed he had the right to carry out. And what made him even more dangerous was his ability to remain in control, choosing the time, the target, executing with precision, and then going home, hugging his children, kissing his wife, as if nothing had ever happened. The dark secret behind a genteel face. John Eric Armstrong was born in 1973 in North Carolina, USA. To neighbors and acquaintances, he appeared to be the ideal man, gentle, calm, and devoted to his wife and children. During his time in the Navy, he was even regarded as an outstanding sailor, trusted by superiors, decorated with multiple commendations, and promoted 4 times. No one could have imagined that beneath that respectable exterior was a deeply disturbed man with a dark past full of trauma and hatred. John's childhood was marked by relentless abuse at the hands of his father, a violent and cruel man who physically and emotionally tormented him. The deep psychological wounds from those early years never healed, leaving behind a shadow that would haunt him for life. In 1989, John attempted suicide and underwent psychiatric treatment. but was later released as a supposedly normal person. His first known murder occurred in 1992. From that point on, his psyche began to unravel. He developed a deep-seated hatred for women, especially sex workers. According to his later confessions, John believed they didn't deserve to live, that killing them was a form of punishment he had the right to deliver. This hatred was further fueled by a breakup in high school, when his girlfriend left him for a wealthier man. To John, that betrayal confirmed his belief that all women were shallow and driven by money, no different from prostitutes. He began to murder as a way to vent his rage, to take revenge for the pain and humiliations he could never escape. That was when the true monster awakened, hiding behind a face that seemed harmless, even kind. The trial, when the mask fell, after his arrest and interrogation, John Eric Armstrong confessed to a string of murders, not only in Detroit, but in several countries during his time in the military. However, to bring him to justice, police and prosecutors had to build an airtight case, especially for the crimes committed on U.S. soil, where the legal system demands solid, indisputable evidence. In March 2001, the trial for the murder of Wendy Jordan, his first known victim in Detroit, officially began. Inside the tense courtroom of Wayne County, John appeared in an orange prison jumpsuit, hands shackled, his hair cropped short, his face pale, and eyes sunken. He was no longer the mild-mannered man once seen in military uniform. Now, in front of the public stood a cold-blooded killer who had cast a long shadow of fear across the city. Based on DNA evidence, John's own confession, survivor testimonies, and detailed investigation records, the jury quickly reached its verdict. John Eric Armstrong was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. He would never walk free again. 3 months later, in a second trial for the murder of Kelly Hood, he was handed another life sentence. This time, he didn't defend himself, didn't claim innocence. He simply nodded in silence. Other murders, including those of Robin Brown and Rosemarie Felt, could not be tied to him with sufficient physical evidence and were thus classified as second-degree murder. For those, the court gave him an additional 31 years, bringing his total sentence to 2 life terms without parole and over 3 additional decades of imprisonment. Throughout the proceedings, John rarely lifted his head to look at anyone. He often stared down at the table, hands clenched, eyes red, perhaps from regret or simply from exhaustion. Occasionally, he whispered apologies, but no one in the courtroom believed they were sincere. The victim's family sat quietly in the back rows, many in tears. Some stood and addressed him directly, delivering powerful statements. "You took my daughter from me, and no apology will ever bring her back. I want you to know she had a name, a life, people who loved her. She was not just another number on your list of the dead." Yet perhaps the most terrifying truth wasn't in the sentence itself, but in the fact that a man who seemed so perfect, so praised and trusted, had been able to hide a monster inside for so many years. At the time of sentencing, John Eric Armstrong was just 27 years old, an age when most people are just beginning their careers. But for him, life had effectively ended behind bars. The gentle mask had fallen, and when the truth was revealed, all that remained was an abyss of guilt, blood, and the betrayal of trust. A warning after the case. The case of John Eric Armstrong wasn't just a shocking killing spree. It served as a chilling wake-up call for society. What haunted Detroit the most wasn't only the number of victims, but the horrifying truth that the killer was someone trusted, a father, a Navy veteran, a friendly neighbor. It proved that monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they smile at you, live next door, wear a uniform, and earn your respect. But behind that calm facade were deep, emotional wounds left untreated. And when left to fester, those wounds can grow into unimaginable horrors. Let's not forget the victims, mostly sex workers, women already ignored in life and even more easily forgotten in death. Society's indifference made it easier for someone like John to operate undetected and without fears. Ending. A question for you. What do you think? Can a painful past justify a cold blooded murder? Or is that just an excuse from someone trying to avoid responsibility? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the darkest sides of human nature.